Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God, He it is that brought us up and our fathers out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, and which did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way wherein we went, and among all the people through whom we passed. And the Lord drave out from before us all the people, even the Amorites which dwelt in the land. Therefore will we also serve the Lord, for He is our God. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I want to again thank you for the privilege that we have to be able to open your word. I think of, as was said in the prayer time just a little bit ago, about those in other countries that cannot do what we're doing right now. They can't freely gather. They can't freely open your word and take time like this without fear of persecution, without fear of death. Lord, I thank you for the privilege that we have. Lord, help us not to lose sight of that, the privilege that we have to be able to hear, to gather and hear from you. Lord, I pray that you'll bless this time, Lord. I pray that you'll help me not to get in the way of your message this evening, Lord. I pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. As I said, this was in my studies as we came near the beginning of the year. This was kind of the passage that God used to get my mind headed this direction for the series we've been on all year long. This passage, the children of Israel have left Egypt and have been led of God. And in the stretch from Egypt until right now, Joshua 24, and I know it's a significant span of years, but in that time, they have seen some amazing miracles. I mean, in that time, right after they left Egypt, they saw the parting of the Red Sea. And it doesn't matter how many times you read that, if you really spend any time thinking about what happened, it's flat out amazing. That the sea opened up so that a nation of people could walk through and completely dried up, so the sole of their shoes doesn't even get muddy. That doesn't happen. That's amazing. That same sea that just spread so they could walk through on dry ground then destroys their enemies for them, so they don't have to fight. God takes care of it for them. I mean, that is quite the thing to see. In this time between Egypt and now, they saw miracles like the manna, where God is feeding them in a miraculous way. They saw things like the water from the rock twice. Once, it was supposed to be once smiting the rock and once speaking to it, but twice they saw water, God providing water from a rock. And again, I've said this in messages before, not a trickle of water. We're not talking God, gave them a little spring. We're talking about enough that it gave enough water for a nation and their animals. This is significant water. In that time, from Egypt until Joshua 24, they saw things like God providing the quail for them. They saw things like they wandered in the desert for all these years and their shoes never wore out. I mean, these are some amazing miracles that they saw in that span of time. In that same time frame, they saw some pain. In that same time frame, they saw the spies who came back from the promised land and gave an evil report. In that span of years, they spent the next 40 years after those spies wandering the desert until an entire generation died, and they knew what was going on. I don't know, maybe it's just my brain. I don't think I can grasp just how miserable that would be. Waking up every morning knowing, hey, we disobeyed God, so now we have to wander the desert until we all die. That's a miserable way to live. They saw some serious pain in that time. They saw things like the ground opening and swallowing Korah and all that pertained to them. They saw some pain. In that span, they saw some victories. We often think of Jericho because, it's a big deal made about it, the way that God fought that battle for them. But by Joshua chapter 24, they've taken the land. It mentioned in what we read about God driving out the people, even the Amorites. They've seen a lot of battles at this point that God has given them victories all along the way. One in ways, when we looked at Jericho, as I spent some time trying to point out, one in ways that only God could have done. They've seen all of that not that long ago. In that span, they've seen some defeats, battles like Ai, that because of disobedience they were defeated, they were embarrassed, and men lost. Hey, in that span of time from Egypt to now, they've seen God give them the land. They mentioned it in verse, I believe it was 18, that they talk about that again, that God giving it to them. I don't think it can be stressed enough just how much of a miracle that is. A group of untrained people wandering around in a desert came into a country with trained soldiers ready to defend their homes, and they won. They just watched God give them the promised land. And yet where we find them tonight, after they have witnessed all of that, and obviously they remember that, because when in Joshua 24, they rehearse some of that back, so they remember that these things happened. Yet where we find them tonight, they've returned to their false gods. After seeing all of that, and after seeing everything that God had done for them to this point, after seeing in their history all that God had brought them through, where we find them in Joshua 24, they've returned to their false gods. And God comes to the people, and for our series, I want us to try and see from this side, God tells them you have a choice. You have some choices to make. Now, before I get into that, I want to take just a minute, and I think it's fairly obvious, but point out some relevance in this to us, because our nation is in pretty much the same place. And I believe because of that, we are faced with the same decisions. Our nation, I think, undeniably has been blessed by God. You can't look back through the history of our country and not see it. Our forefathers built this nation on Christian principles, and I'm not going to say that they were all Christians, but the things our nation was built on were Christian principles. You can look through the history of our nation and see time and time again that God has blessed. You can look back on at your own life and see how God has blessed. I know that everyone in this room is in different places here tonight, and some may feel like, well, I'm not as blessed as that person. But as Pastor mentioned, I think it was Sunday in his message, that if you're in here and you are saved, you are blessed. Whether you recognize that or not, you're blessed. We live in this country. You're blessed. I realize that our country is doing some things right now that I'm not proud of. But there's no country in the world where you would have liberty like this anywhere. You're blessed. And yet, as a country, and if I'm just being brutally honest tonight, as children of God, despite all that God has and is doing for us, again, as a country and as children of God, we've turned to other gods. We've allowed other things to become more important in our lives. Revelation 2 talks about it as leaving our first love. Our love for God and the things of God are no longer where they should be. It would, I think, be easy for us to hear this and point the finger at our country and at the people around us. That's the easy thing to do. Well, yeah, people have turned from God and someone else has done this. But let's look at ourselves tonight. 2 Corinthians 7:14 says, "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin, will heal their land." Notice that starts with my people, not if the world would do this. His people. That's us. Not if the world would call on, or not if the world would humble themselves and pray and seek His face, but if we would. So tonight, here's what I want to do as His people. Let's look at what God says in Joshua 24, those choices that they had to make. The first that I want to see tonight, choose who you will serve. Look at verse 14. Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now I want to see a few things of importance here. The first is, very plainly, God calls them out. You notice God named their false gods and where they were serving them. I don't want to take much time with this, but I think it's worth seeing. God has no problem pointing out our sin, making it known. We would like the idea of kind of sweeping it under the rug and forgetting it exists. God doesn't do that. God calls it out, but I think it's important to see with this choice that He has, choose you this day whom you will serve, there's no choice to not choose. That makes sense? It made sense in my head. There is no choice to not choose. That's not an option, just say I'm not going to choose. Often we like to kind of play the diplomatic card and just not make a choice one way or another. We've all been in that situation. You have two people that come up to you and they ask you a question, and no matter what you answer, one of the two is going to get mad. If I answer this way, that guy's going to get mad, but if I answer this way, that guy's going to get mad. So what we try to do is not give an answer. We try to just, stay vague, not answer. In this, there's no choice not to choose. God makes it very clear, and I love that about God. He doesn't make things confusing for us that, we would mess up just because we didn't know. He makes it very simple. Either God or the false gods. That's the choice He gives them. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Verse 15, where you go? Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It gives them the option, either God or the false gods. No option not to choose. It's also important that we see the choice is one or the other. One or the other, either God or the false gods. It can't be both. It can't be both. That's where this is often where we struggle. We don't mind the idea of giving God part of me. But we struggle with the idea of I'm going to give God all of me. I think of the song, I Surrender All, and we sing that as a invitation song very often. I think if we were really honest, we should probably sing, I surrender some to Jesus, I surrender some. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it. It doesn't work. I can't say, I'll serve God. I choose God, and I'm going to serve God on these days and at these times, but the rest of the time, I'll serve the God of myself. But again, if we are being totally honest, it's very often what we do. That we give God Sunday, and we might give God Wednesday night, but then the rest of the week, those are me. I'm living for what I want to accomplish. I'm living for the things that I'm trying to gain. I'm living for what I want. That's I don't know if this is a real thing. I've started using this as of late. That's what American Christianity often has become. That it's become, I will serve God when it's convenient for me, and I'll serve self the rest of the time. But it can't be God and self. It can't be God and self. God doesn't say, choose you this day whom you'll serve. You can serve me 3 days a week and the gods of the Amorites 4 days a week. It has to be one or the other. It has to be God or self. So just, if I'm going to keep being blunt here tonight, if it's God and self, it's not God at all. It's the reality of it. If we are saying, I serve God on these days and I serve me the rest of the time, you're not serving God at all. You're serving self. The Bible says you cannot serve God and mammon. You can't have two masters. The Bible makes it pretty clear. Here God gives, if you will, gives the people an ultimatum. Choose. Choose. Me or your false gods. I could put it this way, me or you. Choose who you serve. Second thing I want us to see that they had with this choice is choose today. Choose today. Verse 15 again, if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, look at this next phrase. Choose you this day whom you'll serve. This day. Now, I know I've said this before in messages. We tend to procrastinate. We tend to put things off. I know I am one of the worst about this. So we tend to put things off. This is not a decision to be left to another day. And notice God doesn't give them the option of making this decision another day. God doesn't give them the option of, choose you tomorrow. It's choose you this day. He didn't tell them, hey, I know this is a hard decision, and I understand your fathers serve the gods of the Egyptians, and I understand, there's the emotional attachment of your father's gods, so I know this is going to be difficult and hard for you, so you can take some time. God didn't say, let's schedule it in 2 weeks, we'll meet back here and you can choose. Come back, and we'll make a decision then. No, God puts them on the spot. Choose you this day, right now. The choice to serve God rather than self, rather than the gods of this world, which, again, I'm kind of bringing to self, but the choice to serve God is a choice that needs to be made today. For a few reasons. You have no idea that you have tomorrow. You have no idea you have tomorrow. We all know the verses about this idea. The Bible makes it very clear. Life is like a vapor that vanishes away. We know we have no guarantee of tomorrow, and often we will use that in regards to salvation, that a person shouldn't put off getting saved because they have no guarantee of tomorrow, which is a valid application. Today is the day of salvation. It's not something that should be put off, but why should this choice be any different? Choose today who you'll serve because you have no guarantee that you have tomorrow. And since I have no guarantee of tomorrow, I ought to live today and every day like it's my last day. Choose today because you don't know that you have tomorrow. Choose today because you have no idea the pressures of tomorrow. I know I'm not the only one that this happens to, that you have something that you need to do. But you're tired. You've had a long day. Things have come up through the day, so you put it off for tomorrow. I'm exhausted. I don't want to do it. After all, today has been busy, and I'm tired, and I'll have time to get to it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and it's busier than today was. And you've already put it off, so you really shouldn't again. But the pressures of the day are getting to you. It's no different spiritually. This decision to serve God, to choose Him over the world, to choose Him over self, is no different. If you put it off because of whatever excuse we may come up with, it'll be no easier tomorrow. You'll have just as many pressures. You'll have just as many struggles, just as many things pulling your attention to the world and to self as you did today. Choose today. Choose today because you have no guarantee of the conviction of God tomorrow. Again, this is one of those things we often will preach or will use in regards to salvation, but it applies in any area of the conviction of God. God is working in you today, so today is the day. I don't know what the aversion to coming to the altar is, but there are a lot of people who make all sorts of excuses not to come to an altar. And I've never understood what that reasoning is. You know, some people think that maybe others are watching them and will judge them if they come to the altar. Let me just tell you, most people are not watching you. If you won't come to the altar because you're afraid people are watching you, get over yourself. They're not really paying that much attention to you. And if they are, they're not right with God anyways, and they should be there with you. So let's just come to the altar anyways. Like that, there is no reason for that. But you don't know that God will prick your heart tomorrow. You don't know that. Think about this, and maybe I'm just oversimplifying it, but wouldn't it be a shame if God stopped convicting you because you put it off for too long? That you just kept putting off making the decision to serve Him for so long that your heart grew hard enough that you no longer felt the conviction of God. How sad would that be? And yet, it happens to a lot of Christians. Choose today. Choose today who you'll serve. Choose today, as in don't put it off. And then, last thing I want us to see tonight, choose no matter who else does. No matter who else does. Verse 15, I'm going to focus on the last part, but we'll read the whole verse. If it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. And then this last part, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, notice Joshua here. Joshua gives his choice. He is challenging them to make a choice. He's gathered all the people. This is what God says. He's challenged them from what God has said. Hey, this is what you ought to do. And then before anyone else has the opportunity to speak, he says, hey, this is my choice. Now, praise the Lord, in this case, when he does, the multitude followed him. Right after he says this, the people jump in right behind him. Of course we're going to serve God. But it didn't have to end that way. It didn't. The people could have, right at that moment, said, you know what? We want to serve the gods of Egypt or the gods of the Amorites. And this would have ended way differently. And to be perfectly honest, it wouldn't have been that shocking. They were prone to serve other gods. They had many times before, and quite frankly, many times after this, left God to follow false gods. They could have easily said, well, you gave us the choice, serve God or the gods which our fathers served, or the gods of the Amorites. We choose one of them. But Joshua didn't wait until they made their decision to announce his. I don't think he was even trying to, as he gave what God had said, I don't think he was even trying to read the crowd to see how they would respond. Sometimes you can do that. You can see what a person thinks about what you're saying based on their attitude and their eyes. I think it's one of the most interesting and terrifying things about preaching to me, looking at the eyes of people while you preach, because you can very often tell what they think of what you're saying right now. And sometimes the look in their eyes is not what you want to see. That's why a lot of times I will stare at the back wall, or I'll find people that are smiling and I'll just keep looking back and forth at them, because whether they agree with me or not, at least they can paint on a fake smile and it's a little bit nicer. I don't think there was any of that. It's not like he's looking to see if the people are going to be in agreement with him. No, Joshua took a stand, made a decision before he knew how anyone else would react. Because Joshua's decision to serve God wasn't based on what anyone else did or thought. His decision, choose you this day whom you'll serve, Joshua's decision wasn't based on what the people did. It was based on what God said, which really ought to be true of us. It shouldn't be that my decision to serve God is because someone else does. It really ought to be between God and I. A couple observations on this. Someone has to be the first one. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Someone has to be the first one. You can be talking about trying a new food or a new hiking trail or spiritually standing, someone has to be willing to be the first one. Every year we do the whitewater activity down on the White Salmon River. And to me, I have always thought I want Mark Zoller to invite me. Maybe he'll see this online since I just mentioned his name. I want him to invite me one of these years, because every year before they open the falls to the public, they do a trip with just guides. Because someone has to be the first to go over the falls to see if it's safe for everyone else to go over the falls. That would be so much fun. But someone has to be the first. Hey, in choosing to stand for God, in choosing I'm going to serve God, someone has to be the first one to take that stand, like Joshua did. Someone has to be willing to lead. That's what this is. Joshua stands, and his stand influences the others to follow. Taking a stand and being that first one to make a decision is not easy. But when you do, others will see and others will follow. Some have to be willing to stand, though, even if no one else does. And there is that possibility. Take a stand, and there's the chance. As far as people go, and we know we have God with us, but as far as people go, it may be you take a stand that I'm going to serve the Lord, and you're the only one. As I said, Joshua didn't know. He made that stand. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, and he had no idea who was going to make that decision with him. Things could have gotten really ugly if no one else decided to stand with him, but his stand wasn't based on others. As I said, it was between him and God, and if no one else stood, he was still going to stand. If no one else stood, Joshua was still going to stick with, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I can say that pretty confidently, because when he came back with 12 spies and only one other spy agreed with him that, hey, we can take the land because God said it, Joshua didn't back down just because the crowd was going the other way. This is a man who was willing to say, no, this is what's right. Serving God is the stand I'm making, and it doesn't matter what the nation does. This is what I'm going to do. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. So I want to conclude this message this evening. So I'm going to try and wrap it up this way. Tonight, it's time to make a choice. It's time to make a choice. It's time to stop being an Americanized Christianity that serves God only when it benefits us and serves self the rest of the time. It's time to stop that. Choose to wholly serve God. To wholly serve God, that I'm going to give him everything. Choose today. Stop putting it off. Stop making excuses because you don't know you have another day, and choose to stand regardless of what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter what the world around you is doing. It doesn't matter what your friends are doing. It doesn't matter what brother or sister so-and-so are doing. This is you. You choose who you will serve. As I study for this message, I'll give you this, and I'll be done. As I studied for this message, God kept bringing this to my mind, and I don't want to. I hesitate saying this because I don't want people to feel like they're pressured to do this or anything like this. But wouldn't it be great if families came together to pray tonight and just simply said, "As for our house, we'll serve the Lord"? Wouldn't it be great if on the way home tonight, dads said to their family, hey, in our house, we serve the Lord. No matter what everyone else is doing, our house, we serve the Lord. And not just in word. Because it sounds good. It sounds like the good Christian thing to do. Not just in word, but really meaning it. Really meaning it, that our goal as a family, our goal, our focus, our priority will be to serve the Lord. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Let's pray. Lord, I want to thank you for the way you spoke to me through this message. Lord, as I've been studying for it and preparing for it, Lord, I do pray that you will help us to make a decision today. Lord, I think it is so common of every one of us to be divided, that I serve God on these days. When I serve God, maybe when it's convenient. I serve God, some of the time, and then I serve my goals and my plans and my desires the rest of the time. Lord, help us to realize tonight it can't be both. That if that's how we're living our Christian life, we're not choosing God at all, we're just choosing us. Lord, help us tonight to decide, hey, as for me and my house, we serve the Lord. That our attention, our focus, our purpose, our goal in life is going to be to serve God and do what He desires.